Evangelion.
The year is 1997. It's a warm summer night in late July, and you're heading into the city to see an orchestral performance for one of your favorite TV series, Evangelion. It's not only dominating the culture, but it's dominating the box office. You just saw the end of Eva earlier this week and were elated by its incredible visuals, tightly woven narrative, and amazing soundtrack. You thought the series composer Shiro Sagisu did a pretty great job with NGE, but this knocked it out of the park. You make your way through Bunkamora Orchard Hall and take a seat in the large auditorium. The lights dim and the music starts. You relax a little bit, getting comfortable in your seat as you soak in the performance. Somewhere between Decisive Battle and Ray 1, you find yourself having a thought. Man, Evangelion, it's pretty cool actually. Like, I get this. This makes sense. The show continues. Canon in D begins. You think to yourself that this is one of the best tracks used in the entire series. This symphony is truly making you admire the craft of Evangelion's soundtrack. But as you sit there in some kind of trance, something unexpected occurs. A large crashing noise blasts from the speakers, jolting you back into the present moment. The song tapers off, and for a moment, there's silence. Suddenly, a rhythmic chant to the tune of Canon in D begins over some type of beat. The orchestra picks back up and continues playing. This isn't what you thought they would perform. Nothing like this was in the series. And then, as you think this song couldn't stray any further from what you were expecting, it happens. Some guy you've never seen before in your life just walks out on stage and begins to rap. You don't feel as comfortable anymore. You lean forward in your seat, trying to make sense of what you're seeing. Somewhere between the first and second verse of this performance, you find yourself having another thought. What the fuck does this have to do with Evangelion? Hey everyone, it's me, Zen Buster, esteemed YouTuber, biggest Karikano fan in the world, and today yet again, Evangelion lecturer. Who you're seeing on stage right now rapping is Molly, although we're going to get to him later. The song that he's performing, Armageddon, is a track from an arrangement album that will be released the following December, named Evangelion Vox. This album, as you could probably deduce from the video title, is comprised of hip-hop R&B remixes sampling the Evangelion soundtrack. Crazy, right? Well, it's not that crazy if you really think about it. Evangelion is one of the all-time champions of unneeded merchandising, from figurines, food, jewelry, entire theme parks and theme park attractions, coffee, Hello Kitty toasters, what I'm sure is a completely normal game of Mahjong, ammunition, and of course, music. Evangelion isn't even a stranger to doing unexpected things with its song choices. Scoring mecha fights with classical music is pretty weird in itself. Plus, this was the 90s. If Pokemon can do it, why not Evangelion? Still, with all of that said, this album is utterly bizarre. Over 20 tracks, it switches between tones and styles, abruptly shifting from corny school dance love songs to violent and still corny hip-hop tracks. But through it all, it still manages to have an underlying theme of only kind of having to do with Evangelion. Today, I'd like to examine this oddity a bit, and see if I can make heads or tails of where it lies in the Evangelion mythos. If there's anything I've learned making videos already, when it comes to Eva, there's a rabbit hole pretty much anywhere you look. And although nothing here is earth-shattering necessarily, there's still probably quite a bit more than you think. Before anything else, let's take a quick look at how this album was distributed. Evangelion Vox was released December 1997, not in a traditional jewel case, but instead this strange tin with a red and blue yin and yang symbol embedded on top. The album was later reprinted in the style of a standard CD release, although pictures and information corresponding to this seem less common. There wasn't a listing on Discogs or anything. I wasn't sure it even existed until I found a Yahoo Auctions listing. From the pictures I found though, it looks like this was released on December 2nd, 1999, missing the 2-year anniversary of the album by a day. In searching for this, I also found a promotional poster and commemorative coin keychain thing for sale, so it's safe to say that there was at least some effort poured into marketing this thing. The visual design between all of this is unique for Evangelion. None of the characters or Evas are anywhere to be seen on the packaging. The closest thing to the standard iconography are these minimalistic designs used in the inserts and on the poster. These all correspond to characters or concepts from the show, such as this one representing the atom embryo and this one representing an AT field. The cover art for the second pressing addresses the client for the album as the 18th Angel, which, in case you haven't brushed up on your Evangelion lore recently, is you, the viewer. I think this style for the packaging fits the album though. It's aesthetically inspired by Evangelion without exactly being Evangelion, the way I would describe a lot of the music on this CD. The tracks on Evangelion Vox can, for the most part, be split into three categories. Melodic 90s R&B songs that sample the Evangelion soundtrack, featuring the vocal talent of Lauren, grittier and considerably more surreal hip-hop tracks with raps performed by the aforementioned Molly, and finally, songs that have absolutely nothing to do with Evangelion through both musical composition and lyrical content. If you recognize the name Lauren from the R&B tracks, she was the vocalist who performed the end of Evangelion credits theme, Thanatos, If I Can't Be Yours. There are a few songs that don't fall under any of these categories though. The first and final songs on the album are spoken word, with a booming voice literally just credited as the Lord announcing,
World's worst nightmare has appeared. Evangelion!
Eat your heart out, Jesus. Again, I'm not really sure how many of the lyrics actually have to do with this series, but we'll get more into that later. Thanatos, If I Can't Be Yours, is also on this album exactly as it was off of the End of Evangelion soundtrack. Nothing on this album fits together. The shift between the slower R&B songs with barely any connection to Evangelion and the intense abrasive rap tracks cut with vocal samples from the series is jarring to say the least. I feel the best way to illustrate this would be to cover this album track by track, tracing the ways that Evangelion music is reincorporated and sampled throughout the songs. Keep in mind though, due to YouTube's copyright system, I can only play short clips of the music, if at all, so if you want to experience Evangelion Vox in its entirety, there'll be a link in the description where you can listen to it. The album opens with the aforementioned spoken word track, Evantroduction. What begins as a hodgepodge of sounds and voices from the series, chaotically playing over each other without rhyme or reason, dies down into a question and response echoing throughout multiple people's different voices.
Do you love me?
Do you love me?
No.
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 Suspenseful and ominous music begins as a villain from a Saturday morning cartoon starts preaching about how we're born evil or something. I'm going to be honest, this is pretty low on the relevance to Evangelion scale, which is a bad sign because it's the first track off of the album. Following up Evantroduction is the track The Image of Me, Vocalize. This one samples the song Rei 1, the theme most closely associated with Rei in the series. The lyrics here do match up with her pretty well, easily connecting to her damaged sense of self and inner struggle to find a connection to the world around her. Lyrics that come in later on the track could possibly be interpreted as Rei's feelings of herself as a disposable clone. Or these could be intentionally vague and shallow lyrics that match up with this character by pure coincidence. Either or, the transition between the first two tracks isn't that dramatic. It helps that Rei 1 is already a suspenseful song, so The Image of Me naturally feels foreboding. The next one, From My Dreams, cuts off what little connection to Evangelion there was to just be generic 90s R&B at its mediocrest. The most insightful commentary I can give on this song is that if you sped it up fast enough, it'd sound like something out of a 90s arcade racing game. Then we have Evangelism, which is a short interlude that serves to lead into Can't Get You Out of My Head. Both of these incorporate the track Mother is the First Other, the ethereal song that plays both times Shinji makes a connection to Yui within Unit 1. Evangelism doesn't do anything particularly unique, it's just a cover of the original track, but I think how Can't Get You Out of My Head incorporates the sample is pretty great all things considered.
When you're far away from me,
Mother's the First Other doesn't lend itself to a melodic love song well, so the fact that they not only incorporated it, but turned it into one of the better tracks off of the album is kind of impressive. Lyrically, everything is still pretty generic, but since the sample is closely linked to Yui, I think it's interesting to spin it as Gendo's obsessive internal monologue, musing about trying to get her back.
Can't get you out of my head, got you in my heart. I'm going crazy just to be with you.
Up until this point, everything has been pretty normal for an Evangelion hip-hop R&B album. Nothing has clashed too much, the production has been tightly woven, and the lyrical content has been accessible, if vague. You might even be thinking nothing here is anything to write home about, it's just generic pop songs with Evangelion samples. But let me assure you, dear viewer, that if you thought that was all this album had to offer, then you've been terribly mistaken. I'm Zinbuster. I actually make other YouTube videos, believe it or not. If you've seen the Evangelion USA bonus video, you probably already know what track I'm about to talk about, because I briefly discussed it there. But believe me, it bears repeating. The next track is Explicit. This one samples the full scene of Shinji masturbating to the comatose body of Asuka, while Molly, the rapper who's going to be appearing throughout the rest of this album, repeatedly swears in utter disgust. I don't see any need to flow into that track any more fluidly, because this album sure fucking doesn't. What I think is interesting about Explicit is that it stands out even against the other Molly songs off of here. The following tracks, Prelude to Battle and Battling, are pretty tame and corny all things considered, and Armageddon, Angel Attack, and Utopia, the three other songs done by him, get weird but nowhere near as weird as this. Except maybe Angel Attack, but we'll get to that. But you know what? I think that might actually be the point of this track. They manage to seamlessly snatch you out of one style and throw you into another by diverting your attention to something so out of left field it's all you can focus on. It's like the musical equivalent of that video of the bear walking through the basketball court. I might be giving this album too much credit, but this is the only explanation I can come up with, other than Shiro Sagisu turning to Molly in the studio and saying, "You know what would be really funny? Prelude to Battle and Battling follow, being two halves of what I assume is this album's representation of a battle against an angel." In the first track, over a funky instrumental sampling the iconic Decisive Battle, our vocalist gears up to fight with such hard-hitting bars as, "You're a can of pop without the fizz. You're a shopping center without the mall. It's going to be so much fun when I snap your neck. I'll give you the first blow. Oh, what the heck." It's great to know that the Evangelion rap song has lyrical aptitude on the level of music from Sonic Underground.
Ha! Hey! I'm getting so mad right now! I don't even want to go there! Don't even go there, homeboy! Cause I'll break you up, son!
Battling is more of the same, but I think that the production on this track sounds much better and fuller.
The day of reckoning is here, oh yeah, it finally arrived. This is it, only the strong survive. A supreme being of power, a tower of strength. Defeat me, you better go to great lengths.
The added sounds here almost make this one sound calmer, ironically. Also, multiple times throughout the track they play these cut-up samples of Asuka battling the JSSDF from the end of Evangelion, which is a really nice touch. It makes me wonder why they didn't do this more throughout the album. It would serve making the experience much more Evangelion-like. They even went as far as to make the sound effects and False Regeneration, the song playing in the background of the samples, blended to the instrumental. I figure that Shiro Sagisu could have gotten access to the original voice clips without any of that, but he actually committed to chopping them up in the style of this period. Also, I don't know if they knew when they wrote the lyric, "I'll disown you like your mom and dad," but I really hope that they knew. The next two tracks make up a short interlude and full original unedited version of Thanatos, If I Can't Be Yours. Nothing to say here, what you see is what you get. I'll Always Be On Your Mind bears absolutely zero connection to Evangelion again. You can tell this because the lyrics are about moving on from a lost relationship in a healthy and mature way.
Now that our time has passed, I can still remember all the good times we.
There isn't any sample I could identify, so it probably serves us best to just move on to the next track. Armageddon is the song that you heard at the beginning, performed by Molly at the Evangelion Symphony. This is by far the most iconic song off of the album, with multiple uploads to YouTube of either the song itself or the symphony performance having pretty high view counts. I already talked a bit about the production of the track during the beginning. It of course samples Canon in D, which was used multiple times throughout the compilation film Evangelion Death. What I think makes this track really stand out, however, are the lyrics. At a first glance, it's your typical conscious hip-hop "we live in a society" bit, with lyrics about how life sucks and the world sucks and everyone sucks. But remember, this is an Evangelion album. When you look at it under those lenses, this starts to sound a lot more like the motivations of Seele for bringing about human instrumentality.
How many times must we start again? The creation of the world from beginning to end. What will it take before we learn? We gotta wake up now and show some concern. How great and wonderful are your days? How bright and true are your ways? No more death, grief, crying or pain, cause only the good things will remain.
Jesus Christ, I have to applaud the originality on making your homage album partially written from the point of view of a death cult. This is like if they made a Matrix album, but half of the songs are about how awesome it is to work in a cubicle. This isn't a bad song to have as the most well-known off of your album, though. Better this than one of the bland R&B tracks. What I can only describe as an officially sanctioned AMV for Armageddon was released as part of the Neon Genesis Evangelion music DVD, a collection of music videos of songs inspired by the series. The contents of this release were also included in the Evangelion G-Kids Blu-ray that recently released, if that's something in your possession. An instrumental version of the song also exists on the Shiro Sagisu Outtakes from Evangelion album, that, at least of when I'm writing this, is up on Spotify. Next up, Kom Sussotad Tumbling Down Mix. This is a chipper and upbeat rendition of the track that plays alongside the total annihilation of mankind during the climax of End of Eva. Exactly the kind of tune that makes you want to get up and dance. I guess the original version wasn't the most solemn song either, but it still had this sadness to it. Here the vocalist just sounds fucking pumped for the destruction of mankind.
What's done is done, it feels so bad. What once was happy now is sad. I'll never love again, my world is ending. Ooh.
I like this one though. Misplaced cheerfulness aside, it actually sounds fantastic and is one of the best renditions I've heard. The preceding two tracks, Angel Attack and Utopia, are where I think the weirdness of this album reaches its peak. Explicit is out there, but as I said, I think that was what it was going for. These two songs just feel like the strangest possible interpretation of the concept you could come up with absolutely zero irony. Angel Attack follows Molly encountering what he thinks is some kind of angel, not like the ones in Evangelion, but grounded in actual religious imagery.
Late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, I woke up stretching and yawning. I got a visit by something out of this world. I wasn't sure if it was a boy or a girl.
The angel plays mind games on Molly in order to take him away or perpetrate some kind of bad action onto him.
Sometimes people get tested that way. The evil will feast on easy prey. But I'm not Emil, you can't take me alive. For the good die young, only the strong survive.
All of this is over a droning instrumental sampling the song The Beast, combined with an out-of-place female vocalist and this earthbound sounding synth. The rap kind of eases in and out of the mix, making everything feel disorienting and otherworldly. It's definitely achieving the intended effect, but it still contrasts with the production of every other song up until this point. It's one thing for the lyrics and the vocals to clash between every song, it's another thing for the track to sound like it's from a completely different album. Utopia reels it in a tad, but it still sticks out like a sore thumb. This entire track is a sample of Aaron G, used during Asuka's last stand against the mass production Evas, layered under a simplistic breakbeat and these repetitive vocal samples. Piggybacking off of the lyrical content of Armageddon, Molly muses about how great existence is now that he's in heaven, or instrumentality or whatever.
In this world, everybody's equal. Live this life, the next is the sequel. It's as good as I always thought and wished it would. Millionaires and princesses in my neighborhood.
Human individuality has been eradicated. Everyone now exists in a world without hatred or violence.
One religion, one God for every race and creed. No more wars, no more hurt, there's no need to bleed.
It seems pretty obvious in the context of this album that he'd be referring to human instrumentality, but multiple lyrics refer to people going to hell, so who knows. This actually makes me wonder though. The previous track has a shape-shifting angel that appears to be trying to attack Molly. Could this angel be Quantum Ray, appearing to bring him to instrumentality in this track? It's a pretty big stretch, but maybe they put more thought into these lyrics than I first assumed. Promised Land, Reprise, and its full version follow up Utopia, sampling one of my favorite tunes off of the soundtrack, Next Episode. The lyrics in this track don't necessarily fit with Evangelion, as many do, but it could be seen as a response to the lyrics of Utopia and Armageddon, where those tracks are about how terrible the world is and how we should reject individuality and just fucking kill ourselves, I guess. This track is about living the life we have to the best of our ability and embracing the hand we're given. I don't like this song too much, but I think it sounds fine enough when they hit the chorus. At least we know if making anime soundtracks didn't work out for Shiro Sagisu, he'd have a flourishing career writing the credits themes for 90s Nickelodeon movies. Am I being too mean? I feel like I'm being too mean. Next up is Star, which also samples Next Episode, at least I think. It's the last real track on the album, closing everything up with a ballad reflecting on finding hope in the world. I don't feel like there's much insight I can give on this one, it's more or less repeating the themes of the series back to you. This feels like an extension of the previous song with a quieter and more peaceful tone.
Hold out your hand and you'll be amazed what you can get through if you just communicate.
Evangelion Vox finishes up with a short interlude of The Image of Me, playing under scattered voices of Ray, and one last spoken word track featuring our good friend, the Lord, preaching similar lyrics to Star.
Never shall we return from conflict. We must learn.
And with that, the one and only Evangelion hip-hop R&B album comes to its conclusion. Hopefully you can understand what I mean now when I say this is in a constant state of clashing styles and messages. You have songs like The Image of Me, Can't Get You Out of My Head, and Armageddon that opt for more aesthetic similarities to the original series. Songs like Utopia and Battling that actually correspond to specific moments, albeit loosely. Songs like From My Dreams and I'll Always Be On Your Mind that have jack shit to do with Evangelion. And songs like Angel Attack and Explicit that come completely out of left field. As I said earlier, I don't think this album is too out there conceptually, but its refusal to commit to a specific version of its concept makes it stick out amongst the other spin-off works. If I were to offer some suggestions, maybe instead of trying to structure this as a cohesive album, label it as songs inspired by Neon Genesis Evangelion. That way you can make the sudden shifts in tone feel less disjointed because instead of a sound thematic experience, you're just compiling songs. There's already an album like this, called Refrain. The songs were inspired by Evangelion, and I think it does a much better job at balancing everything. There is still deliberation in how songs are ordered, but it isn't trying to juggle too much like Vox. Granted, Refrain also tends to reuse music more liberally, but the comparison still stands. Between me and you though, Evangelion Vox doesn't have Soul's Refrain on it, so even if it didn't have pacing issues, it still wouldn't stand a fucking chance. A theory I came up with over the course of creating this video was that this was just Shiro Sagisu's pet project that had loose Evangelion elements incorporated, so it would have a larger reach. Most of, if not all of the artists credited on this project have an extensive relationship with Shiro Sagisu outside of Vox. Not only is Lauren, the vocalist on all but 2 of the R&B songs, also the vocalist on Thanatos, but she appears extensively on both other Shiro Sagisu soundtracks and solo albums. So does Mike Wizgowski, the lyricist on all of the tracks except those by Molly. MASH, the credited producers of Can't Get You Out of My Head, Thanatos, Komsasata, Tumbling Down Mix, Promised Land, and Star, are actually a musical duo comprised of Shiro Sagisu and musician Martin Lascelles. I'm not getting down on taking liberties and bringing on collaborators to make something unique, but all of this could explain the limited similarities to the actual series. Mike Wazowski, outside of translating Anno's lyrics for Comme Ça Se Todd and odd jobs on various soundtracks, doesn't really seem to have any connection to the franchise. I'm not sure if he had extensive notes from Gainax on how to make the lyrics he was writing have anything to do with anything. But Zin Buster, you probably aren't saying, most Evangelion songs don't have a massive connection to the story. You're just nitpicking. I am, but also, nothing in Soul's Refrain or One Last Kiss contradicts Evangelion like some of the songs on Vox. They're inspired by the series, which circles back to my point that they should have executed this album differently. Interesting concept, poor execution in my opinion. Fascinating microcosm of Evangelion merchandising history. There are a few more interesting notes to make about the people involved here. The two songs severed from the franchise completely, From My Dreams and I'll Always Be On Your Mind, both feature the same vocalist, Carol Thompson. I'm not exactly for sure, but if music database sites and my own ears are anything to go by, I believe she's a fairly accomplished musician that's released quite a bit of solo material. If I had to theorize, I wonder if these two tracks were recorded separate from this album and added for padding. But what complicates this even further is that I actually stumbled upon a version of From My Dreams on one of Shirosagisu's solo albums, known here as Love Changes. But interestingly enough, the vocals are now done by Lauren instead of Carol. Who knows, maybe Shirosagisu just really likes this song. The London Gospel Choir does vocals on Evantroduction, Evangelism, Armageddon, Comme Ça Se Todd Tumbling Down Mix, and the outro. The group is actually extremely accomplished, not only collaborating with Shirosagisu on other Evangelion spin-off albums, but also working on projects such as the fucking Lion King. Yeah, they actually recorded for The Circle of Life, and also on the songs Don't Get Lost in Heaven and Demon Days by Gorillaz and Thug Life by Brockhampton. Finally, my 5 degrees of separation between Hideaki Anno and Drake are complete. Amongst all of the artists I've been able to link to other discographies and Shirosagisu collaborations though, there's one major contributor who stands out. Everyone else has had an extensive list of credits, except for Molly. Despite being, in my opinion, one of the most memorable parts of the album, there's hardly any information about this guy. Ever since I saw that clip from the Evangelion Symphony I played at the beginning, I've been curious about who exactly that rapper on stage was. Who is he? Has he worked with Evangelion before or after this? How did he fall into the gig in the first place? How much knowledge of the source material did he have when he did this song? Does he have any other solo work or appearances anywhere? One of the things that makes this album really stick out is that Molly is such a prominent part of it and has absolutely zero connection to the series outside of this. After some research, I was able to track down some information about him though. First of all, if this comment on a re-upload of the Evangelion Symphony performance is anything to go by, his real name is Andrew Allen. His comment says that this was his first live performance, meaning that when Evangelion Symphony and Vox were done in '97, he must have been fairly early in his career. Another comment he left in reply to someone else, he says, "Thank you. Coming soon. New shit." This was only posted 3 months ago, so we can deduce that he's still active in some form, assuming this is really him. I could also locate 2 other songs that Molly did with Shirosagisu, digging through Google and music databases. The first is the song Number 1 off of the Bleach Memories of Nobody soundtrack. Now, I don't know much about whatever a Bleach is, and I've never seen this movie, so I don't know for sure, but the impression that I got is that this song isn't actually used and it's just a remix. On this track, Molly is credited as MC Malicious Gravy, which I'd assume means Molly is a shortening of the word malicious. Other than that, I really don't feel equipped to talk about this song, so hopefully this clip will give you the gist of it.
And you know, I am stuck my big shit, yo. I ain't going down like a hoe, because I am malicious, yo.
There's another mix of this masterpiece on the second Bleach soundtrack CD, known here as Number 1 Nasty Mix. Oh, I get it, nasty. The other track I could find featuring Molly is on a Shirosagisu solo album from 2 years after Evangelion Vox was put out. Shiro's Songbook is a long-running series of albums that have been releasing consistently for the past 20 years, with the 11th installment in the saga scheduled to drop this month on January 26th. One of the songs on the first CD, Winter's Blue, features our guy Molly alongside Lauren. Now, there's actually something pretty interesting about this one. Although the music on Shiro's Songbook albums are often original compositions for the projects, some of the tracks do incorporate music from other Shiro Sagisu soundtracks, in a similar fashion to the music from Evangelion Vox. What soundtrack, other than Evangelion, could this song pull from? Maybe something that's similar to Eva that would have released around the same time frame. Winter's Blue is actually an officially licensed, officially produced, hip-hop remix of a song from the Kari Kano soundtrack. Winter's Blue samples the track Soichiro Arima 1 that can be found on the first Kari Kano soundtrack CD. Ironically, I'm not a massive fan of this song or anything. If it was on Evangelion Vox, I would have placed it pretty low on my track tier list. I'm more just amazed that there's actually a song for Kari Kano equivalent to the songs from that album. Somewhere in an alternate timeline, Evangelion was relegated to a single track on Shiro's Songbook, while the far superior and infinitely more iconic Hideaki Anno anime, Kari Kano, received the full Vox treatment.
But I smile and I try to forget the pain. It's killing me inside, it's driving me insane. A kiss and a compliment, I miss you. It hurts so bad, Winter Blue.
Molly and Evangelion Vox are just a footnote in the long and gratuitous history of Evangelion spin-off media. But if we can take anything away from their existence, it's that this franchise has never been afraid to expand and try all sorts of things. People criticize the rebuild era of Evangelion for its extreme merchandising, but as far back as when End of Eva released, we were receiving all sorts of confusing and questionable media. There are far too many Evangelion albums to single out Vox as the worst one. It's bizarre, yeah, it has terrible pacing, but rather than regurgitating the most surface layer elements of Eva, try something different. And is there anything more Evangelion than something like that? I don't know, probably making your lyrics actually relate to the show. I wouldn't exactly recommend Evangelion Vox, but if you're a fan of the series, maybe give it a listen. God knows Eva fans will snatch up anything that remotely has to do with the series. I'm glad I'm not one of those people who get hyper obsessed with a single specific topic to the detriment of every other facet of their life. On that note, I'm Zinbuster, the biggest Kari Kano fan in the world, and I will gladly fight anyone who challenges that title. If you enjoyed this video, I have a 2-hour documentary detailing the history of Evangelion localization in the United States. If you'd rather see me at my best though, I'll hopefully catch you next video. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all soon.